Welcome to the Sonya Buchanan Show, where we inspire one life, one smile at a time. Hello, everyone. It is time for the Sonya Buchanan Show, where we focus on one life, one smile at a time. Listen, we have a great show for you today. The name of our title is going to be Hungry for Fruit, and we're going to dive into our discussion right after this commercial, so stay tuned.
Did you know by being the best you in just 60 seconds a day can add up to a positive better you in a total of 365 minutes a year? That's 6 hours exactly. Be the best you, even if it's slowly achieved by seconds. You'll gain more to being a prosperous you. Remember, as you take steps, whether they're small or large, the end results will be surprisingly great. Visit us on comfortingpromises.com, and while you're there, visit our store with the latest products available.
Welcome back to the Sonya Buchanan Show, where we focus on one life, one smile at a time. Again, our subject for today's podcast is hungry for fruit. You guys, this is going to be one of those interesting analogies, something that I have stumbled across and I wanted to share with you. I stumbled across it a couple of years ago, and again, I was reminded when it embraced me again, and I wanted to share it with you on this podcast. Again, our title is Hungry for Fruit. Now, I want to share with you, and it's interesting. I live in a neighborhood, and a couple of my neighbors have apple trees that sits in their front yard. And I remember a couple of years ago, maybe about 2-3 years ago, I was walking around in my neighborhood, just, taking a walk. It's about a mile in my entire neighborhood. So I was taking a walk, and I noticed during the summertime, two of my neighbors, but this one particular neighbor has an apple tree in their front yard. It's a huge apple tree, and it bears green apples. I don't know if anyone's interested or they enjoy Granny Smith apples, but Granny Smith apples are delicious green apples. And as I was walking in the neighborhood, I noticed how flourishing the apple tree was filled with apples. So many apples that the limbs was leaning over. The tree hasn't been pruned, so there was apples from the top, which you were able to, grab the apples if you're standing on the ground. That's a farmer, and they understand that you have to till the tree, and you also have to prune the tree so the apples grow out and not up. Well, I noticed this one particular year that my neighbor apple tree was just consumed with apples. So I never said anything. The second year, I'm walking in the neighborhood, and again, this tree is filled with apples. And what I noticed is that the owner or anybody in the family or the children, no one ever picked the apples. The apples was the size of the apples that you would purchase at the grocery store. They were healthy to eat. They were ready to be picked. But the owner who was bearing the tree of the fruit, they never desired to eat the fruit. So I decided one day to ask my neighbor, can I pick a couple of apples off their tree? And they were happy and they obliged. They said, you're welcome to as many as you like. So I took 2 grocery bags and I filled them with the apples. Now, my mother, she is very good about canning things. So I took one of the bags over to her house and she made apple jelly from the fruit. And what I thought about the other day, I'm walking by my neighbor's yard and I'm seeing the same tree. And again, the neighbors are not consuming the apples. The tree is healthy. The fruit is there to eat. If anyone was hungry, I'm sure anyone could probably knock on my neighbor's door and ask, could they have some apples? And they will probably say yes, as they did for me. But I thought about that and, just kind of broaden out the analogy here that my neighbor have fruit to eat. But I thought about something. There's an analogy here that anytime that you are hungry for something, it's not going to come knock on your door. And I thought about that because although my neighbor lives walking distance, that tree never would have knocked on my door and asked, well, the owners do not want me. I'm just bearing all this fruit, and the fruit just rottens every year, falls to the ground, dies. And then the next year, according to the universal laws in nature, it bears more fruit. It just continues bearing fruit every year. But I thought about something, and for the sake of this podcast, to say that my neighbor's tree is not going to knock on my door and ask, did I want them? Do I want to eat some of the fruit off their tree? That tree is never going to walk to my door and ask, did I want them? I had to go to that tree and ask the neighbor, could I take a couple of apples off their tree? And I thought about this for the podcast, that we have so many people who are in need of things and they refuse to ask. It's okay to ask. My neighbor could have said no. They could have just simply said, no, you can't have any of these apples, although they're not eating the apples. But I still can go to the store and get the apples. But I saw these apples was free and they were not utilizing what they were growing successfully. And I thought about it because it was tons of apples. I'm talking about if you know what an oak tree, the size of an oak tree is, this is the size of this apple tree. And just imagine how many apples. It probably could have been more than 300 apples on this tree. The limbs was just leaning over. So you can just tell the weight of the apples, the size of the apples, and it was flourishing. And I went to my neighbor and asked, could I have some of their fruit? And they said yes. And I thought about how many times that we are needing something and we never ask for it. The people who are bearing so much fruit, I'm sure that they probably already picked a couple of apples. They probably don't even like green apples, I do that a lot of times when I'm growing a garden. I grow jalapeno peppers, and I don't even like the peppers. I just grow them because I know a lot of people that do like the peppers, and sometimes they just get overwhelming. And I'll ask my neighbor. Now, this is one of the scenarios. I will ask the kids that's walking by my neighbor houses or walking by my house and ask, do they want any peppers for their parents, And I would just tell them to come pick them because they just grow and grow and grow. And it's just too many to consume for one person. So I just assumed that the same thing was happening with the apple tree with my neighbor. They probably have ate so many apples over the years that they just do not want anymore. But I thought about that analogy. And also, there is a peach farm that is near my home that you can go, and it's a peach farm. And they have probably over 500 trees of peaches that is open to the public, where you can go to this farm and you can pick these peaches. But interesting about this farm is that they cater to the public. So the peach trees, they prune the peach tree and the peaches grow out so the public can go to this farm and they can stand on the ground and pick the peaches off the tree. It'll be easy access. Now, the reason why I'm sharing both analogies, one, my neighbor tree is not pruned, so I wouldn't be able to grab the fruit off the top of the tree, but the farm peach trees are pruned so the tree and the fruit grows outwardly, so I can stand on the ground and it'll be easily to pick the best fruit. Now, these are two different scenarios, although the same type scenarios, but there are times in life when we look at things where people are accessible and they're not accessible. And we have to determine which one is best to ask. I say you ask both. The only thing that they could say is no. No is not always a bad answer. At least you was courage enough to say, can I have, or can you provide, or can you answer this question for me? But if you never take the opportunity to go forward and reach for something that you're in desiring from, a fruit, because fruit could be anything. I'm just using the analogy of a real fruit as an example of something that you're desiring. But if you never take the opportunity and ask for something that you're desiring as a fruit, you'll never know whether the person or a situation or a corporation or a company or a restaurant, whatever it is, whether you give them the opportunity to say yes or you give them an opportunity to say no. But if you never take the time and the steps to go forward to something that you're desiring, you will never witness either way. But one of the things I don't want you to cap and be nervous and be afraid to ask what you're desiring. People have experienced the same incidents in their life as one another, except sometimes when we're looking at other people who are bearing so many fruit and we're like, oh my goodness, they're not going to talk to me, but they're being in the same position as you are, except they may have taken the time to go, as I did, to my neighbor's house because I saw that they had so much fruit and they were not consuming it. And I decided to ask them. You have to decide to ask what you are desiring, especially if you're hungry for something. There's information. People will provide information. Good-hearted people will provide information, and they are willing to give it freely. I don't want you to think that people are not going to give you information. If you're desiring, they will give it to you. One of the things that I have experienced in life, I've always asked questions, and sometimes they say no, and then sometimes there's more times that they say yes. Or if they don't know the answer, they will lead me to another person who has the answer for what I'm desiring. I want you to strive to go forward this year, the rest of the 2021, and start asking for the things that you're hungry for. And I speak to those who are really interested in going forward and who they are and possessing some of the things that they're desiring. Not being ridiculous and childish about it, but being mature about asking for the things that you're hungry for. And there's some things that I've asked for that I'm hungry for and have not received it. But then I find some other solution as to why. Am I receiving it, or am I giving it to myself before I ask someone else for it? Or am I asking out of selfish reasons or selfish gains? Or am I asking to understand why I am hungry in this area? But whatever it is, always reach for whatever it is that you're hungry for, because there's always learning in every step that you take in life, whether it turns out to be a no or a yes. Either way, no or yes, you still learn from that because you took the opportunity to go forward, to reach for something that you're desiring. But listen, you guys, this is the end of our podcast. I did not want to make it long. I just want to get to the point about again, our title for today's podcast is Hungry for Fruit. And I wanted to just really just narrow that right on in and just say, what are you hungry for? And where do you see the fruit that you're desiring? Take the step and ask. The internet right now is so worldly free, and we can ask Google, or ask internet, or we can ask people around us, or we can just read books. The library is filled with information, but don't take the stance of not pursuing what you're hungry for. So that is what I wanted to just touch bases with you this week. And remember, you guys, thank you so much for joining us every single week. Thank you for support. And this is your girl, Sonya Buchanan, with the Sonya Buchanan Show, where we focus on one life, one smile at a time. See you next week. Bye. Thank you for joining our podcast today. The podcast was produced and edited by Sonya Buchanan. For more information about the host, you can go to sonyabuchanan.com. For information about Confident Promises broadcast community, you can go to confidentpromises.com. Thank you for listening to our broadcast, The Sonya Buchanan Show, where we focus on one life, one smile at a time. Until next time, bye you guys.